Gurmila Magas, agus we're gain phone tonight. We're broadcasting from Kildare House, right across from the Dáil this evening, as various votes and debates are going on. We will be joined by an extensive panels later in the programme, but first this evening I'm joined by Noone, who's the Fine Gael Senator and Chair of the Oireachtas Committee on the 8th Amendment, and also by Philip Ryan, who's political correspondent with the Sunday Independent. As you've heard, the Oireachtas Committee dealing with the issue has voted to repeal the 8th Amendment, and it also proposes to allow unrestricted termination up to 12 weeks. Now, you're very welcome to the programme, Senator Noone. Noone Mullen, who was also on the committee, said today that this is abortion on demand up to 12 weeks. How do you respond to your fellow committee member?
Well, I think it's important to put it into context. The decision that the committee came to today was as a result of months of deliberations in Leinster House, where we heard from a variety of experts on all sides of the argument and none. And with the end result that a motion was put down to cover, under the reason of rape and incest, to cover that situation, because most of the evidence that we heard was very clear that, especially in the legal area, it was very clear that rape is almost impossible for us to get into the Constitution in any way, or to even legislate for. So I believe that's a huge part of why we came to the decision that we came to today, and also the abortion pills were another big factor in that a lot of Irish women are taking abortion pills in an uncontrolled, without GP assistance, and are perhaps afraid to go to the GP if they have an issue, etc. And it was the one issue that Justice Laffoy said that they would have covered more if they had had the time, and we therefore got evidence on that, and hence the decision that we came to today.
Can I ask you about the 12 weeks?
Yeah.
Where did the 12 weeks come from? Because, as you know, Noone Mullen, among people who are against it, they're saying that it's abortion on demand for up to 12 weeks. But where did the 12 weeks figure come from?
Well, I suppose the 12 weeks figure is based on sort of comparative countries internationally. It's considered internationally to be a reasonable date at which certain things can be detected or found out about a pregnancy. So the 12 weeks is as long as I am involved in this debate, it's either 10 or 12 weeks that people talk about in terms of a potential gestation period that would be less liberal, least liberal.
Can I ask you, just to spell it out, what happens at 12 weeks that gives us more or less information, or why? Explain a little bit more to me in detail.
I think you'd need to get a doctor to talk to you about that.
Well, what did the doctors tell you at the committee? The
doctors told us that women are taking abortion pills, and that when they, on the one hand, another thing that they told us was that they feel that they can't make decisions that they need to make based on the current legal position. So they feel that...
No, sorry, but I'm still at this 12 weeks. Why couldn't it have been 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 weeks, for example? Or for that matter, why not 15 or 18?
It could have been 10 weeks.
Why did you decide on 12 weeks?
Well, there was a motion put down by Billy Kelleher, Lisa Chambers and Ned O'Sullivan. And in their motion, they mentioned 12 weeks. I didn't know until that motion came in what way we were going to go.
You heard the evidence. Was that based on anything you heard?
It was based on, of course it was. Yeah, of course it was based on evidence. But I don't know why you're zoning in on the 12 weeks because...
with respect, people will want to find out it could have been a shorter or a longer time
and
period.
It still could be potentially 10 weeks or 14 weeks.
But the international... By the Citizens' Assembly, was that not one of the...
Pardon?
Was that not offered down by the Citizens' Assembly, 12 weeks?
The 12 weeks, well, obviously the Citizens' Assembly mentioned 12 weeks, but they went into a lot of gestation periods. So we
one of the more popular was 12 weeks.
Yeah, and we didn't get into... Yeah, you're quite right. And we didn't get into the gestation periods at all, other than the 12 weeks, actually, in that motion. But we hadn't decided as a committee to talk about all...
that terminations should be allowable in cases of rape and fatal fetal abnormalities, and when a mother's life or health is at risk. Now, there were some reports today that suggested that this includes mental health. Is that right?
Well, there was a discussion today as to whether health encompasses mental health and physical health, and it was felt by the committee that that health is both, and a lot of people on the committee felt that it's equally as important. Both of them are equally as important. Yeah.
And just to flesh it out a little bit, how does? Can you give me a little bit more detail on that? If an abortion or a termination is allowable when the mother's mental health is at risk. How so? How would that work?
Well, you know that the current position is that if a woman is at serious risk to herself in the area of suicidality, that the current position is that a woman in those circumstances
But correct me if I'm wrong, that is her life being at risk, is that right?
Yeah.
So does this go beyond her life being at risk?
Well, it doesn't go as far as her life being at risk in a way. I mean, the point is that it's mental health, so that...
Is this non-fatal mental health, is that right?
I would think so, yeah. That's fair to say.
Yeah.
So if a pregnancy was to cause depression, it would be okay within 12 weeks to have an abortion?
No, you see, that's...
But that's a
very overly simplistic way of putting it.
Well, can you tell us what it means?
Can I tell you what means?
Just exactly the point we're discussing here, that the committee voted today that terminations be allowable when the mother's health is at risk, and you say that includes mental health. I'm asking you, what does that mean?
It means exactly what it says, and again, you'd have to defer to doctors when it comes to who adjudicates those situations. And I don't mean to be evasive, but that's just the reality.
No, absolutely, that's no problem. The committee also rejected today that terminations be allowable based on socio-economic considerations. Why was that rejected?
I'm not sure why members voted the way that they voted. It was rejected. And various members spoke on that issue, and certain members were very keen for it to be included, and obviously a majority decided that they weren't in favour of socio-economic grounds for abortion.
And what does socio-economic grounds mean? Was there any evidence in the 3 months that the committee heard deliberations that gives you insight as to what that could mean?
Yeah, it could mean women who are marginalised due to difficult circumstances like a drug addiction. It could mean women who are very, very poor in abusive marriages. It could mean a lot of very vulnerable women, potentially.
How do you respond to people who say that the committee's procedures were simply unfair?
Well, I'm very used to hearing that at this point, and all I can say is that from the get-go we decided that our witness list would be based on the Citizens' Assembly's witnesses and witnesses suggested by members, and there was more buy-in by certain members than others, and the reality is that I suppose it's difficult to get medical practitioners in Ireland to come in to our committee and tell us that they think that the status quo should be maintained.
Okay. Can I ask you, before I move on to the what happens next, the mechanics of the referendum and so on, and how it's worded in the bill that goes along with it, was it considered by the committee, I'm sure it was, how much consideration was given to repealing and at the same time proposing a bill to put something else in its place?
To put something in its place, well, repealing means that it comes out of the article comes out of the Constitution. The legislation, it is anticipated, and it's the committee. I believe we will report. I don't want to be preemptive because we have to agree our report tomorrow, but I believe we will report that legislation should be produced in tandem. Obviously, that's a guide, and it will depend what happens politically. But the reality is that. That's the situation that I suppose is beyond what happens in the committee. We will report to the Oireachtas, and it's really over to the Oireachtas to decide. And ultimately, it's very important to say that the Irish people will decide this.
Yeah.
And really, we're facilitating a vote of the Irish people.